everybody. Today I wanted to talk to you a little bit about Cuba and Cuba travel because a lot has changed if you haven't looked at going there since pre-pandemic times. So I'm going to try and I'm just going to speak casually to you about some of the things you should know. The most important of which is our legal issues that have changed under the current administration. I'm talking right now, it's almost July of 2022. This past month, some of the things that went into effect, that independent travel is no longer allowed unsponsored by a group without specific permission and applying for a specific license. That's one of the biggest changes that has happened. Some of the other changes are less likely to affect you. For example, donative remittances have been restored. Western Union is still not open, so when you travel to Cuba, any money you're going to need, if you're a US citizen, you have to bring with you because your credit cards won't work, your debit cards will not work, no one can wire you money, and US dollars are no longer changeable at CADECA, the official exchange bureaus. You are legally allowed to use and spend money in Cuba, and if you bring dollars, there are some places that will accept them, primarily transportation. That's the primary place where you can use dollars. Otherwise, it's euros. You can use Canadian dollars and British pound sterling, but your exchange rate won't be as good. The other thing to know in terms of exchange and money, if you have traveled with us before, you might remember there used to be the Cuban convertible pesos that visitors used, as opposed to the Cuban pesos, the moneda nacional that primarily Cubans were using. Well, now the convertible pesos are no more. You have to use Cuban pesos, and the complicating factor is because everything is pegged to the US dollar, but you cannot exchange US dollars, most people are going out into the street on the black market and exchanging their currency because you're going to get more like 80 to 100, 108, 110 pesos to the dollar. And again, I'm talking to you at the end of June 2022. So all of these things are changing quickly as inflation impacts Cuba. So this means it's very hard to look at a budget if you're looking at a restaurant where they say, for example, it may be 700 CUP, Cuban pesos, moneda nacional, for your ropa vieja, and that's going to be anywhere from $5 to $30, depending on how you've exchanged your money, what currency you brought. And of course, if you brought euros, then it means you lost a lot on the exchange just to buy those euros before you arrived in country. All this to say, whatever you thought was complicated previously in terms of budgeting and looking at money for your trip has gotten much more complex. And if you think, okay, well, maybe you're a dual citizen, maybe you have a bank account in Canada or Mexico or someplace else that you think you can use, you may be able to use those cards and you may be able to use your ATM card, but some of these vehicles will only allow you a digital currency that it spits out, kind of like a gift card, and those are only used in specific stores. I know it's complicated. It's complicated for us, and we spend a lot of time looking at and dealing with this, and it's hard for us to keep track of. We have wonderful staff in country that tries to guide everyone through this. I think it's important to know if you're traveling to Cuba, not only is it something that we're constantly looking at and figuring out on behalf of our volunteers, but it can change at any moment. So whatever I'm telling you now could still change. So just know going into this that not only legally are the reasons for going to Cuba changing quickly, how you get and spend and exchange money has changed very quickly, but everyone around the system this is very new for, because they were closed for a couple of years due to COVID. So all of the agencies, all of the groups, anyone traveling to Cuba, all of this is coming back to life slowly and under new rules. So it's complex for everyone. So you need to be a little patient. Where this would always be the case in any country we go to, that you have to expect the unexpected. In Cuba, this is doubly, triply, quadruply so because of the legal ramifications. The other thing you need to know, we do have a video that we'll link to below that tells you how to fill out your Cuban tourist card. This is also something new and different in the last few years. So we will walk you through this and how to do it, where to get it, how much it costs, how to fill it out, all of that. We'll put all of that in down below so you can see it. But you also need to know that as you're traveling right now, there are currently 12 legal categories if you're a U.S. citizen under which you can travel. And so for GlobalWare, for our general license, there are 3 categories you will be selecting from the 12 that apply to our GlobalWare volunteers and their travel. One of which is support for the Cuban people, because obviously the projects and programs that we're doing there are there specifically to help regular, everyday, local Cuban people. It's also one of the reasons why we only stay in local Cuban homes. Legally, you're not allowed to stay in hotels right now if you're a U.S. citizen, but also it really does help the local Cuban people by staying directly in their homes. Number 2, humanitarian reasons. That's the second reason. So either support for Cuban people, humanitarian reasons, and then the third category, which applies to GlobalWare that you can choose, is the work of private foundations, because obviously GlobalWare is a private organization. So really you can pick any of those 3 reasons when you're booking your airfare, when you're filling out your tourist card, when you're filling out any related travel related to GlobalWare and our volunteer travel. You are going to need to choose one of those categories. And I would just be consistent across with it, but all 3 apply to GlobalWare travel. And we are a 501c3 nonprofit organization. We're also a Canadian charity. So as you're going across borders, if anyone asks you why you're traveling, you'll want to make sure you keep current with the specific terms as you come back. When someone asks you why you were in Cuba, you're not just going to want to say, yes, we were working with kids on the spectrum, working with sensory deprivation and so on. They're going to want you to boil it down to saying support for the Cuban people, humanitarian reasons, or the work of private foundation. It's really those 3 terms, even though the detail of what you're doing, whether we're working with the elderly or we're working with kids or we're working with special needs or we're working with the Club de Madres, the vocabulary of the specific categories is important to keep in mind. Another thing I'll tell you with Travel to Cuba, which is so specialized, the vocabulary within Cuba, we are, as an organization, having to abide by the laws both of the United States and Canada and in Cuba. And this can be a tough, tricky situation. And I'll give you an example. A lot of people going to Cuba want to bring things for the local people. And the words around what these things are differ depending on if you're the sending country or the receiving country. And this is one of the few countries where I will say this. Our materials will walk you through this, but in the case that you're not reading through the materials and you're listening to this video, it's important to know the reason this is important is obviously Cuba's government is different and they're ruled by different laws and policies. So officially, the Cuban stance is they're a country that brings a lot of development, intelligence, and education to the world, and they don't need other countries to provide for them because they're self-sufficient in this sense. Therefore, if you bring donations, it is viewed as an offensive thing because officially their country can provide for themselves, and they will point out, for example, that their infant mortality, their maternal mortality is better than most countries on the planet. So to use words like donation and charity are sensitive topics and sensitive words. So if you are bringing things like, let's say it's a sewing kit, it's a gift for a local that may be in short supply. When you're in a country like Cuba, this is a gift of friendship. It's not a donation. And I hope you can see why, start to see why. Cuba travel is different from any of our other countries in so many respects. The license we're going there for, how you book your airfare, how you get your tourist card. But I also want to point out things like dining and food. You're going to be on your own for a lot of your meals. And this is part of the joy and pleasure, because you're primarily, well, you are going to be eating in people's private homes, and you're going to choose through our structured program, once you're in these homes, your meals. But unlike most of our programs where you go, because of COVID, because of the economic situation, because of the embargo, where it's very, very difficult to get most ingredients and materials. I mean, in many cases, they're getting their oil from China, soy oil that was on a boat for a month to get there. It means that the ingredients that you're eating were very difficult to come by. So the Cuban people are having to cook with a lot less in the way of resources. So you're likely to sit down in one of these homes and be presented with a menu of several options. You're going to choose whatever it is you're choosing, lobster, and they'll say, oh, I'm sorry, we don't have that today. And you'll do the next one, I'm sorry, we don't have that today. So it might be less frustrating if you just start with, what do you have today? And even, let's say we are going to the same place 2 or 3 days in a row, and you've decided to have ropa vieja, one of the most popular dishes. What you're going to experience in Cuba, and I just want you to be prepared for this, is ropa vieja on Monday at one of the homes we go to. The very next day, it is likely to look very different, because the ingredients are just not there. So for example, if you had a big mound of rice the first day, you might have kind of noodles with a little bit of rice the next day. All to say, please don't judge the Cuban people for this, because this isn't about their inability to be good cooks or to not be inventive, because they're surviving with so little. Also to say, to please go into this with this context of understanding why you're not going to Cuba for the food. And it's not, again, because they don't know how to cook. It's because of the lack of materials. The economic situation is about as bad as they've seen in the last 30 years or so. And you may have seen, if you're following the news, many more people have left Cuba this year since the boat lift they did 30 years ago. It's just a very difficult situation for people to live in. So it means the food situation, you don't want to get too set on what it is you're going to be eating, or to get your expectations set too high, because you'll be fed and you'll have plenty of healthy food. But again, this is not a luxurious situation. We're going there obviously for humanitarian purposes. So I know that you're not going here expecting luxury, but you also can't expect consistency. And it's important to know that. And this is, again, very different from our other countries. So let's see, we talked about the Cuban tourist visa card, which we'll link to below. We've talked about the legal reasons. One of the things that's actually gotten easier, assuming that the airlines will continue to run and get through some of the flight cancellations that are impacting the summer of 2022. One of the things that's a lot easier than it used to be is booking your airfare to Cuba. Now you can just pull up American Airlines right now and book your flight from here to Havana, usually through Miami, Houston. There's several main gateway cities. Miami tends to be the most common one. So that part has gotten a lot easier, and you'll be selecting one of the 3 licenses I told you about to book your ticket. That part has gotten a lot easier. I do want to talk a little bit about safety. And some of what I'll say obviously applies anywhere in the world. You can be in parts of the US, obviously, and you need to be worried about your things. That a $1,200 phone, if you leave it sitting in a place in Cuba, when you're in a country where people are making $60 a month in their local currency, a phone represents a year's salary. So you need to be sensitive to the fact that if you're a 12-year-old and you see something like that sitting there, the chances that it can walk off are high. Same in the US too, so it's really not so different, except that what the value it poses for a Cuban compared to someone in the US is so huge. You really need to think about it that way. So your physical safety, you really aren't going to have to worry about your bodily harm in a way that would be out of proportion with any other place you might travel. In fact, I would argue that you're actually much safer in Cuba than you are in other places. But please be cognizant of first of all, I wouldn't go bringing your computer, and I wouldn't bring valuables. The thing that you're most likely to have that you're traveling with that's of value is your cell phone, and you just need to watch that and keep it on you. Let's see, we talked about money, we talked about valuables. Trying to think what else I should point out. The Casa Particulars where we stay, which are at people's homes, the reason a lot of people ask, well, can't I just stay in a hotel? I just think I would get more services, I'd be more comfortable. First of all, it's not legal if you're a U.S. citizen to do that, because they're owned by the government, and legally everything we do cannot be enriching the Cuban government. So this is why we stay in people's homes. But number two, you are culturally going to get a more interesting experience staying in someone's home than in a hotel. Number three, it is more comfortable staying in someone's home. And why is that? If you are staying in a hotel that is owned by the Cuban government, it is being staffed by people that are making $30 to $60 a month. And their incentive to provide services is very low. So if you talk to someone, whoever stayed in a Cuban hotel 3 years ago, they will tell you that if you ran out of toilet paper, getting toilet paper to your room was almost impossible. Your room's hot or cold, no one cares. Your room hasn't been serviced, sorry, out of luck. No one cares. If you're staying in someone's home where you're staying there, the money that you've given to Globeware that we are using to give to the local Cuban people, this is a substantial amount of money for them. They will do whatever it takes to keep you happy. So your services are going to be much higher. You run out of toilet paper, they will get it replaced quickly. So if you're worried about comfort and services, you're better off in someone's home than you are in a hotel. So even if you think, gosh, I just feel like I would be better off in a hotel, I can almost guarantee you that's not the case, even if it was legal, which right now it's not. Now, while I'm telling you all of this, we need to recognize so many of these things that could change at any point. Western Union may decide to reopen their services. I think it's unlikely. The reason I think it's unlikely is they put in a lot of infrastructure when Obama essentially first opened Cuba a number of years ago. And then when the next administration took over and didn't allow Western Union to operate, I think Western Union now thinks, okay, well, we don't know what the next administration will allow or not allow. Why put the money into infrastructure when it might be taken out from under us again? So I think it's unlikely that this is going to be a resource for us or for you. That said, it could change. So be on the lookout. That might change. And the other thing that I think is more likely, hopefully will change, is a more solid currency exchange situation. Because again, right now, we can't in good conscience tell you to go and exchange money on the black market. That said, it's important that we're upfront with you that the CADECA official rates are so bad compared to what people are getting on the street. And I can also tell you that it's what most visitors to the island are doing, are exchanging on the unofficial market. It's not legal, it's what most people are doing. So you need to know that. And if you do decide to do that, there are risks, and there are scams, and there are bills, even old currency, that will be used that you have to be aware of, and we can't be responsible for. This is why we provide these structured programs that are insulated from a lot of this, to where your time is highly organized. And it's not to say that you need to worry in terms of what's going to happen in terms of how our programs are structured financially. Any money that you're using for incidentals, if you've run out of sunscreen or you need some kind of pharmaceutical, you need aspirin or whatever, and you're going to need the money for that, at some point you are going to be confronting currency. And you will have to know these things. So anyway, I could talk to you forever about Cuba. It's a wonderful place to come. Culturally, it's super interesting. It's the right time to come. They don't have a lot of visitors right now, so it's a treasure in terms of seeing something that's culturally just so different from what you know. You know, people just don't have the resources, the material goods that you have at home. And yet you're going to get there and go, how can this lunch be $40? It just seems crazy. But hopefully I'm explaining some of why it's that way, and that you'll come into it with some realistic expectations and some understanding and some forgiveness. That's not, you really can't blame the locals for what's happening. Our governments obviously don't have a good relationship, and this does complicate everything, and this will hopefully be something that changes. But we want to see you. We're ready for you. Just be knowledgeable that so many of these things are changing rapidly, and we still want you to come. We want you to be a part of seeing the treasures that Cuba has to offer and working side by side with them on these projects that are important to them. Anyway, come to Cuba. We're ready to see you.